right, in this one, this is folly and the way of fools. So let's first of all define the word folly or fool. So how is it used in Scripture? Now, in Solomon's wording, apparently it is simply one who lives his life not in accordance with the plan of God. One who lives his or her life not in accordance with the plans of God. That would be a fool. Acting foolish is outside the plan of God, and folly would be, of course, an activity that is outside of God's instruction and God's wisdom. So that's what this is all about. That's what Solomon is all about, and we get really right down to the heart of the matter in this particular lesson because he has folly and wisdom set side by side as two discussions, and both of them are pictured as women calling to people. So let's think about, we have Dame Folly, a woman who's folly, and then we have a woman who is a wise woman calling to people to follow her way. So let's look at, first of all, wisdom. This is Proverbs chapter 9, verses 1 through 6. Proverbs chapter 9, 1 through 6. What an interesting way Solomon opens up and shows us how wisdom should be, how wisdom is and it's personified. And then we have the same thing with folly in just a moment. So someone pick up verses 1 through 6 of chapter 9. How would we summarize that particular call of the wise? And he says, pictures it as a woman building her house. Notice that in verse 1. So here's a woman calling. So how would we define that or summarize, encapsulate the entire lesson here, verses 1 through 6? How would we think about that? Okay, come in here, stay away from sin, live our lives according to God's truth. We have a picture of a house. She has eat bread, drink wine, send out her young women to call, leave your simple ways and live, walk in the way of insight. Insight, that is insight into what really are the repercussions of bad behavior. Be able to have that insight. That's what we lack frequently. So she's calling to us. And of course, we have, as Anita pointed out, we have to live according to God's instruction, and that is pictured as a woman. Now, any other thought on that? Summarization. That is pillars, a firm foundation, a firm support for the roof. That's, it's a house. She's built her house, and she has firm pillars that uphold it. So it's pictured as a house, a woman calling to come into this house. That is, I take it that's exactly what the case is here. Say again. Right, 7 would be that way. I don't know if there's a significance to that at this point or not, but that's true. Well, there we go. If you didn't hear her in the back or you didn't hear on the camera, she talked about the educational system had talked about 7 pillars of teaching, which would be kindness and wisdom and so forth. And they had 7 pillars. That's exactly what we have here. All right, let's look at Dame Folly. This is the opposite now. Verses 13 through 18. Someone read that one out. Verses 13 through 18, the rest of the chapter dedicated to the wicked woman. Boy, there is a great comment, isn't it? So he has foolishness depicted as this woman. And there's always the sin of adultery, fornication that is behind it. You can see that. That's what the idea of stolen waters is sweet, bread eaten in secret is pleasant. So there we have the whole concept of sin. Frequently, Solomon characterizes sin as adultery. Now, the reason for that we'll come to in just a few moments because of the seductive nature of sexual sins. And that, I take it, is why he has pictured it as a woman seducing. I have even in my text, seduction, seducing people that know nothing. That's verse 13. She's seductive and she knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She calls those who pass by. They come straightway into her. And they who come in are those who lack what? Wisdom, lack sense, lack knowledge. They lack what they really need to know. So how are we going to gain that knowledge? This is how we gain it right here. Should it be the case that we gain that knowledge by experience? Don't have to. We can. And that's going to be a hard row to hoe. And he tells us, I'm telling you now, this is the way it's going to go. But unfortunately, people today say, I want to do it my own way, learn the hard way. And boy, when they come out years later, they say, boy, this was a tough row to hoe. Because they have not listened to it. So I've even had people say, well, everybody needs to experience it themselves in order that they might learn. I've heard parents, I think that's an excuse for letting them do what they want to do. Now, of course, when they're out of our homes, we can't control them. But they say, well, they need to find their own way. They need to do their own thing. Well, we're already told what's going to happen. And we know how it's going to go. Why take the position that, well, let experience teach them? Experience is a hard teacher, hard teacher. Do it today while you hear his voice. Harden not your hearts as in the day of provocation. It's chapter 3. There we go. All right, so she's in this, I think all of you, a lot of the women here are in that daily Bible study, Hebrews chapter 3. Same thing. Okay, so there we have the picture of it. So sin is frequently pictured as adultery, and that's what we have right here. So let's just look at one other passage that shows that, and I'm thinking about Isaiah chapter 1. So let's go over here to Isaiah chapter 1. There are several passages I have in mind here, but I wanted to get to a couple of more portions of this lesson here, because I think the importance of it is found in the seductive nature or the mechanics of folly, and he's going to talk about that in a few moments. How does it work? And I think one of the most, at least in my mind, most instructive portions of Scripture regarding sin and the characteristics of sin are right there. So we'll look at that in a moment. All right, let's look at chapter 1. Let's see, I have verses 21 through 23 listed. This is Jerusalem, and this is a frequent theme among the prophets. How the faithful city, speaking of which, Jerusalem, has become a whore. She who was full of justice, righteousness lodged in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross, your best wine mixed with water. Your princes are rebels and companions of thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and runs after gifts. They do not bring justice to the fatherless, and the widow's cause does not come to them. The very first few lines shows us exactly how the prophets are going to continually speak. It's pretty blunt language, isn't it? You've become a whore. That's God's people who have left God. And so we have sexual sins really gives us a picture of how seduction works. And Solomon's going to use that sexual sin to talk about how you and I fall into sin. We'll see how that goes in just a moment. So let me change slides here. Let's pick up, where's my clicker? There we go, okay. Uh-oh. Here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to turn it on first. There we go. How about that? There we go. Okay. So let's look at this. This is the evolution of folly. I'm skipping over number 2, which was basically the penalties of it. The penalties of folly. We have shame and guilt. But I want to talk about the evolution of folly, and this comes from Solomon. I worked to put this together simply because I thought some of it comes before other portions of it. So let's talk about the evolution of folly, and it's like a vortex. It's a vortex of sin. Now, the illustration that is used, I think, by Walter Porter, who writes the book, the psychologist that was at Harding University, gives a great illustration. He said it's like a pitcher plant. Sin is like a pitcher plant. And the pitcher plant, of course, grabs those insects, but does so by enticing them. It has sweet nectar on the lips of it, and so they come and they want to participate. But as they participate, they go downward, and there are hair-like projections that all face downward in the pitcher plant. So that means it's very easy to get in, but what? Difficult, if not impossible, to get out. And that's what happens. And finally, they fall into the digestive fluid in the bottom of that, throat of that pitcher plant, and the insect is history. And Solomon gives us this folly vortex, the same type of situation that we see here. So let's look at some of these passages. First of all, it begins with a state of mind. Now, the state of mind, this is chapter 7. All of these are Proverbs passages. So let's look at Proverbs 7, verses 6 through 9. And anytime you want to stop and discuss it here, that's what we need to do. Proverbs 7, verses 6 through 9. All right, I remember in Bible class, Jimmy Allen's Bible class at Harding University, he would say, I want every young man to read Proverbs 5, 6, and 7. Then I want you to go back and reread Proverbs 5, 6, and 7. I want you to know what those passages are. It's easy to remember. The Sermon on the Mount is Matthew 5, 6, and 7. But this is Solomon's advice to young men, Proverbs 5, 6, and 7. All right, so let's watch how this goes. This is the first stage, and that is a state of mind, verses 6 through 9. At the window of my house, this is Solomon says, I looked out through my lattice. I've seen among the simple, I perceived among the youths a young man lacking sense. All right, there it is. Passing along the street near her corner, taking the road to her house in the twilight, in the evening, at the time of night and darkness. All right, what state of mind have we here? What is the state of mind, stage 1? That's right, the young man is the fly. That's right. Young man is a fly, that's right. That's what we have. He's going to get snagged, okay? So he passes by the street near her corner late at night. Okay, what do I mean by state of mind? Lack of understanding about what he's about to walk into, and the repercussions and the long-lasting consequences that come about necessarily because God has built it into the system. God built it into the system. The long-lasting consequences. So he passed away. And the statement is made, he lacks sense. He does not, okay, this is a pleasurable thing, but he lacks sense in the sense that he cannot see the long-range consequences of his decision. Yes, sir. They don't. Right. They look for it. They want pleasure. Pleasure is number one in their goal. And so that's right. They're lacking sense. They don't see the long-range consequences. Now, I'm going to say this. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. You know what? I'm glad you said that. I don't know if you heard her in the back and on the camera, but he's lacking sense because he put himself near her house late at night. All right. Correct. Don't be near it. We have, what is our mindset, Joe? What is our mindset instead of don't be near it? Our mindset is, see how close I can get on the pitcher plant without falling all the way down. Yeah, is this really going to hurt? Surely not. Surely this is not going to hurt that bad. Surely will not have those consequences. We're just so dumb about the realities of life, and that's the way we're not teaching our children too much about it either. Yes, ma'am. Gullible would be something also. Situational awareness. Yeah. That's right. Nothing to lose, all to gain. So I remember years ago, I always tell young people this when they go to college. I said, okay, for example, particularly in places like Austin and places like that, why would you as a Christian young man go to a coffee shop at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 12 o'clock at night? Why would you do that? Well, I'm going to go study the Bible with people. I was told that. So I was told that. I study the Bible. What's the problem here? If you're going to study the Bible, get to a location that is cleansed from all of that grotesque sin, because that's what's going on in the coffee shops in Austin, for example. You go in there and you're going to see some weird stuff. Well, I'm just talking about a coffee shop. I'm not even talking about a bar, am I? That's right. You're stunned. You're stunned. I know. Well, you know what? I'm going to go back to my favorite preacher again, Jimmy Allen. He would say, after 10 o'clock at night, there is no business for you to be out about town. There's no business. There's no business for you to be around about. Jan? That's right. Well, you did right. There's no business. What business have you? That's right. Nothing good happens after. That's right. How late were you out? Well, I was out till 12. Okay. I am automatically thinking something, big question mark, something's wrong. Yes, ma'am. Well, not only that, but they suck you in. Soon enough, those kids who get to the coffee shops at midnight, now they are in New Age religion. That's where they are. The ones I'm talking about, the ones I know. That's where they are. New Age nonsense. And that's because that's what they're preaching there in coffee shops. All right, let's go to the next one. Number 2. They ignore warnings. Let's go to chapter 7, verses 24 and 25. So they have a state of mind that does not appreciate the dangers that are there. Number 2, they ignore warnings. Verses 24 and 25. Someone pick that up. Okay, here is a voice of warning. But number 2, they ignore the warnings. The warning is there. I'm telling you what's going to take place. Here's a wise man, Solomon. We have many wise men, fathers in this room, who've warned young people about these things, but the warnings go unheeded. Yeah, oh, Dad, you always think badly. You always think the worst. But you know what? We, as fathers, you know what's out there much more quickly, much readier you have understanding than young people who really have no clue what's actually going on. That's right. Well, I don't want to, yeah. Well, I don't want to say you can't learn from others' mistakes, because we can learn from the warnings here in that mindset. That's right. And that's what we're talking about. That mindset, ignoring the warnings. As long as you're in that mindset, you're not going to learn. Correct. Correct. Let's go to number 3. There is also a rebelliousness in it. Let's go to chapter 5, verses 11 through 13. 5, 11 through 13. Right here we have an important ingredient. And that is, he's telling us that later in life, not right now while I'm falling down, but later in life, I look back and I say, yes, I was rebellious. Right, Betsy? I was rebellious. That's what she told. Good. Okay. Well, all right. This is a great lesson for all of us then. Oh, different way, different rebelliousness. And, well, I'd say it smacked of it. Just drive around until after 10 o'clock? Just to, yeah, all right. So, all right, how would you handle a child like that? Joe? What would have happened if one of your children had done that, said, all right, I'm going to drive around, and I'm going to come in after my curfew hour? That was the end of the story right there? You pull him out of that car? Right, right. Good. Jan? Yeah. She said we use a cowboy belt here in Texas. But I want to say this. I don't mean to cast off on any woman here. My grandmother bearing a razor strap or my mom bearing a razor strap did not faze me at all. What did was my daddy, my father. My father. It didn't bother me a bit. My mom, I want to get you at that, or even trying to swap me with my grandma. Oh. That doesn't work. You know what? I thought about that as I was speaking. Yeah, that's right. Jan. That's the way it needs to be. That's only because he had established his authority earlier. Say again. Oh, you know what? I'm going to say this. When I did wrong, my mom didn't spank me, but it hurt me so badly when I came to the door and she was crying. I went to my room and I knew where she was. She was on her knees in the bedroom crying, praying about me. I thought, oh, that killed me. That killed me. Yeah, Scott says the same thing. He said, we didn't have dad at home in those years. And Scott said, you know what? He came home, he laid on the bed and cried, knowing mom was in there crying. Yeah. Dan. And that's the hopeful scene. But I want to tell you, when you get down to the bottom of the folly vortex, sometimes you can't get out. You can't. And that's pretty tough. All right, let's go to the next one. So, rebellious attitude. You're looking back, say, I was rebellious. I know that I said, oh, my dad doesn't know anything. Oh, Dad, you don't know what's going on. But then I look back over the years, I say, no, I was actually rebellious to my father. I was actually rebellious to my father, Dan. And I say that when I look back over the years. Now, number 4 is excitement. There's excitement in some of the things you're participating in. So he obviously compares it to sexual activity. So this is chapter 5 and verse 3. Someone out, read that one out. This is a powerful text. At the end, she is bitter as a wormwood, sharper than a two-edged sword. So there is excitement. You have a little taste of the pleasure. You have some taste of the sin. Once again, comparing it to adultery, and you like it. Why? That's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be. That's how it has been designed by God. Sin is pleasurable, and that's what people are involved in. Yes, sir. That's true. It appeals to your pride. Let's look at the next one. Immediate pleasure. Okay, now we're coming down. We have excitement. There's some excitement here. And then, okay, the act is committed, and we come to immediate pleasure. Chapter 9 and verse 17. What does that mean? Stolen water is sweet. Joe mentioned, if you didn't hear him, that's the way things are to engage on the dark side. It is pleasurable, and we enjoy those things. That's the way Satan has designed it. That's why God has allowed it to be. And we lose our sensibilities, and we begin. I think Joe mentioned something about we start. It works on your mind. Now think about adultery for a moment. How many people caught in adultery? It works on their minds. What do I mean by that? Well, not just that. All right, that's true. That's leading up to it. But now what? After the deeds are committed, now what? Rationalize it. That's exactly what you rationalize it. I deserve some happiness. I rationalize it. Did not? Okay, now we start talking this way. I smoke weed, and God made weed, and God made the body, and therefore I can have some weed because it's a natural plant. Okay, that is a sophomoric stupid idea. It's just, what in the world? There's a lot of things God made, that are poisonous, but then the same thing here. God made the body, and that's what we have in 1 Corinthians 6. God made the body for sex, and sex is a pleasurable thing, so what's wrong with it? All right, what are we doing? We're rationalizing why I'm involved in it. Yeah, everybody does it. There's another one. Everybody's doing it. I'm not getting what I need at home. My wife is a witch, or whatever, and it continues on and on and on, and you rationalize everything that you're doing. It's like, what? But it's just sin. It's just sin. And you look back and say, I was rebellious, and that's what we have. That's why I point out here, immediate pleasure. Now, that next thing that takes place, go to chapter 23, verse 35. And this one shows us that these things are pleasurable, and it's habitual at this point. Now, in this case, in 23, Solomon is comparing sin to alcohol and drinking hard liquor, drinking liquor. And he says, starting in, I think, verse 21, is it? Let's see. No, verse 29. Verse 29. Who is sorrow, who is woe, who is wounds without cause, who has redness of eyes, they that tarry long at the wine, they that go to seek out mixed wine. Look, and he says what? All right, you can participate a little bit. No. What does he say? Look not on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, for it goes down smoothly, but at last it bites like a serpent and stings like an adder. I've heard people say, well, just a little bit will be all right. No, he says don't even look at it in its alcoholic state, because it is going to sting you like an adder. Now, the idea here that we have here is habitual, and I think Joe used the word addiction a few moments ago. That's what it is. It's an addiction. That's a self-wrought addiction. It's self-imposed. So he says, all right, they struck me, you will say. I didn't feel it. They didn't hurt. And they struck me, I was not hurt. When will I awake? I will seek it yet again. What is that? Addiction. That's addiction. Habitual. It's habitual. I've got to continue to have it. So sometimes sin is compared to alcohol. Many times it's compared to adultery, sexual immorality. And this is exactly how it is. He says, now, I know that people say, well, it's all a disease and people have a disease. I personally don't believe that. I believe it's a self-imposed thing. I'm not saying that some people are not more inclined to certain things than, but it is something we can avoid. And Solomon tells you, please avoid it. Don't get involved in it. But what happens, what we call a disease, is actually habitual sin. That's what it is. Habit. I'm in a habit of it. I can't hardly help it. I bite my fingernails, can't help it. I can't help it. That kind of thing. So we have habitual sin. So now we have the consequences. What are the consequences? We saw that already. Chapter 7, verses 22 and 23. Right. Cost him his entire life. And that is everything. Then you have the final stage, which is, as our Lord put it in John 8:34, he who commits, that is, continues to practice sin, is what? You're a slave. You're a slave to sin. How does one become enslaved? We kind of whitewash it in our society. We talk about, people having problems, and that's true. People have problems, but according to Solomon, these are self-imposed problems. Not trying to say we should not empathize and sympathize with those who are in the depths of those problems. They do need to come out, but whether it be a sexual addiction, pornographic addiction, pornography, what a horrific crime is being committed in America with pornography. Do you know that they say it even rewires your brain? Rewires how you think? But you know what? There are a lot of preachers even caught up in pornography. Ooh. Number one country in the world, he said, that produces pornography is the United States. I just read a story of a preacher. I can't remember the other day. Nita was showing me a preacher somewhere that was caught up in a pornographic ring and then was taken down. I just thought, wow. Yeah, it's very, very, very sickening. Well, there's all of these things are addictions But I wouldn't say they're diseases, because disease, in my mind at least, I may be, if you think I'm wrong, I'm happy to hear you on it. But disease in my mind is something, okay, I have a bug that's infected my body and is changing me over. But this is something that's self-imposed. Self-imposed. Say again. Disease later in life. All of this simply to point out that Solomon gives us the evolution of sin, the evolution of folly, and this folly vortex, how sin works. How does it work? And that's the important thing that we need to learn here. So what's the message? Don't begin. Don't start. Don't start. Right. Better immerse yourself in godly things. I think that's exactly right. Colossians chapter 3 tells us exactly that, Sherry. All right, anything else to mention as we conclude? Hang out with godly people, such as in this room right here. I'm going to finish with a statement from my mother, and my mom would say, just as my Aunt Linda did too, and I lived with Todd's mother and dad, Linda and Larry, and Todd and Mark and Alex. I lived with them some, and they would always say the same thing. We had some alcoholics in the family, and they would say, don't ever start. Just don't start. Just don't approach it. You'll not have that problem. But a lot of people didn't pay attention to that in the broader family, but that's what they would say. Don't start. All right.